Hello, my name is Barbara Cooper and I'd like to introduce you to the fourth in a series of videotapes that we're making. This is the fun one, the one in unusual containers, and I hope you'll be able to get some inspiration from it for going out and looking in your own houses and seeing things that you might not have seen before to be able to put flowers into. All sorts of things like a shell or even a little pipe. We're going to show you how to do these in the tape, and I look forward to seeing you at the end, and I hope you're going to really enjoy looking at it. To start off this video, I'm going to start off with this big lump of wood. Now, it's the largest of the arrangements I'm going to do, and this wood is extremely heavy, which is suitable for a fireplace. You're going to need, in all the arrangements, the wet foam or oasis. You'll see me cut it up, but I'm not going to stop each time to show you. So all you need to do is to soak it well. It needs to soak in a bucket of water until it sinks below the level of the surface, and then you know that it's soaked all the way through. It should be dark and not light green in the middle. You need to cut it up with a good knife. I always seem to manage to get the bread knife and then nobody can find it. It's quite a good knife and I can't lose it. Because this is unusual containers and they're not designed to last for a long time, I'm not actually going to use a dish or anything underneath this. This will last in a fireplace for probably nearly a week if it's not in a very hot conditions. The idea is that you can find a piece of wood with knobbly bits or ledges on which you can rest the oasis. Obviously, if you can water it from time to time, it helps. So all you're going to need then is the foliage. And this is a piece of yew, which you just push in at the back. This is a bit wobbly, this branch, but it will stand still once it's done. You can find all sorts of foliage from the garden. This is a piece of nettle. It's not the stinging variety, it's the variegated nettle, and in the summertime it has a yellow flower. It's very good for gardens. It covers a lot of ground very quickly, and the flowers themselves are quite useful to use later on. And because of its trailing habit, it's quite a nice thing to use to trail out of pieces of timber. The fun with all these different containers is that it's things that are natural, and you haven't got to go far to look for them. I'm sure if you went down into the woods and looked in some dead trees and things, you'd be able to find pieces that are not dissimilar. This bit in fact came from Ireland, and I think it's a piece of bog oak. It's very heavy. This is a piece of broom. Broom is another kind of foliage which is very good for using in this type of thing. Some nice big ivy leaves and a nice shaped piece of rhododendron. If you get any bad leaves, then you just want to cut them to a good shape. Cut out the bits that are marked, have been eaten by caterpillars or caught in the wind. Tidy it up a bit. Make sure you cut it at an angle to push in. These big bits have a tendency to swing around, so make sure you push it in well into your oasis. A couple of nice big leaves. The thing about the big ivy leaves is that they last for a long time, and they hide a lot of the container as well. When you're putting in the big bits of foliage, make sure that there aren't big knobbly bits at the bottom to make great holes, so that you can pull them out and make a nice small cut, so you can use it, the container again, for later use, the oasis. Right, these are some irises. Irises are good for use with wood because they're a natural water-loving plant that have a nice straight stem and look quite regal. You can get these in white, yellow, or the normal blue colour. So one bunch does one side of this arrangement. You use them at different angles so that they're not all on the same height when the article's finished. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's handy. The fifth one's missing. Never mind. On this side, I'm going to use some lilies. I'll just put one lily into the middle of here because there should be 5 in a bunch of iris, but one of them's missing. Even if you don't leave the buds to come out, the buds of the lily are quite good for a different type of shape. These are spray chrysanthemums, and they're very good flower for lasting well. And also you can break the spray down for doing in other arrangements, as you'll see later on. Some of them, like this one, are rather large on the spray, so we need to cut these out. As long as you've made sure that the flower stems are actually in the oasis, then there's no need to try and push them in too far. Right, just put a couple into this side. And there we are. That kind of arrangement is very good for fireplaces or a large container where you want it to sort of fill up a big space. If you were having somebody in for dinner and you didn't like them, you could hide behind it. So go out and find a bit of wood and see what you can find. I'm sure you'll be able to find something similar. This is a proper boot, but we've actually painted it black and varnished it so it's all sealed in. We just put a lump of oasis at the top and we've actually painted it. There's a picture of some flowers, and on this side we've got a blue tit. So this is quite a good idea if you've got a husband who goes through his boots, and you can use it as a table centre when he has his pals for dinner. All you need to do is to zip round, make sure you've got enough oasis round with about 1 inch to 1.5 inches above the height of the boot, so that you can push your foliage and flowers up into it like this, and you just go around it, covering up the top bit and the bit of oasis. If you want to, you can use just a single leaf. This is a laurel leaf. This is yew. It's quite a useful plant, this. And you can just put in the bits as you go around. If you use it sensibly, you can cut off all the side shoots and just use those. And you can save your big bit for a bigger arrangement then. Right, we've got some gypsophila. This is known as baby's breath. And you can actually dry this when you've finished with the arrangement. Just take it out and hang it upside down in a warm, dry place and let it dry off naturally. And you've got it then for using in your dried flower arrangements. Just go around like that. Then you want a centre point, and we're going to use some roses. This one's called Golden Times. The things with roses is that you get a very bad petal on the outside, so if you just nip off the ones on the outside, you'll get left with a perfect rose inside. Take that one off because it's opened up. And you also want the smallest bud to go into the centre. Roses don't like oasis very much because they can't get enough water up, so try not to use them too often, otherwise you might find they droop. If they do droop, then the best thing to do is to lay them in a bath of cold water, totally submerged, so that the stem, the head and all the other parts are actually submerged in the water, and it can reabsorb the moisture that it needs, and it should be stiff in about an hour to an hour and a half. That's especially true with Valentine roses because they're always expensive at Valentine's Day, and it's always a shame when you see them when they've all got bent heads because people haven't given them enough moisture. These are spray chrysanthemums, and you can use them nice and tight in, and 1 or 2 stems should do a whole arrangement. Then we have some spray carnations. These are useful because they go round easily, and also you can get them all the year round, and you can use all the bits, the leaves and things, for planting into the garden at a later date. If you just pull the carnation bit back so that it leaves the joint, you'll get a little foot at the end here, and you can take off the top leaves like this and put it into a flower pot, and this bottom end should root. Just pop it into a drop of rooting compound and away with the mixer. It should be flowering again the following year. As it's a circular arrangement, you want to make sure that all the flowers are in all the way round. You haven't got one side fuller than the other. I'm going to use some cream spray chrysanthemum on my side so it balances out the roses on the other. There we are, it's nearly finished. And you can, if you do your drawings on the side to complement the colour of your room, then you can obviously use your flowers to complement the drawings. Let's push this to one side, put it to the front. There you go. A nice boot. Surprise the old man. This is an old iron which you can lift up, and in here you could put a piece of oasis. Probably won't fit, just overlaps, so I made a little point here so I can cut it to the right shape. Like that. Let's see how that goes. It's better. Don't want anything overlapping, otherwise it tends to have an osmosis effect and drips all over your tablecloth. Take that off there. Right. if you half press the top back so it's half open, and then you can take your foliage, start it off at the back. This is a piece of curry plant, a piece of rosemary, a piece of ivy. These are the flowers of the ivy, which are quite pretty. Bit of variegated laurel. This is a piece of hebe. This is a good plant for planting in the garden because it forms a nice bush, and you can cut it all the year round. A bit of Euronymous. I'm going to put the daffodils in next before I get too many pieces of foliage in here. Now the trouble with daffodils is that sometimes it's difficult to get into the oasis, so you need to cut it off nice and straight, and with a thick wire, a green wire which has been coated so it doesn't go rusty, you push it up through the middle, through the bit in the neck bit and just into the bit of the flower. It's like giving it an injection, I'm afraid. It doesn't actually harm it, and it lasts exactly the same length of time, if not longer. These ones I've already done. Just do these ones. Cut off, push the wire through the hollow stem, through the bit in the middle and into the flower head. You'll feel it go through. Don't want to push it too far so it comes straight out at the trumpet. Daffodils are nice in the springtime, and you should have got plenty in the garden to use for this type of arrangement. It has to be a fairly large arrangement, otherwise they will dwarf anything any smaller. Put up any gaps with any greenery. Now if you wanted to, you could use some spray chrysanthemums in there. And a few spray carnations. Just show you this side in a minute. I've used some spray chrysanthemums on this side to give me a bit of a different colour, keeping it to yellow and white because yellow and white go well together. If I turn this around now, you can see what I've been doing on the other side with the spray chrysanthemums. And if you wanted to, you could just add a few streamers of ribbon. All you need to do is to have some of this thin ribbon, and we join it together at the top. We take a thin wire, a thin green wire, and we just make a hairpin and just bind the longer of the two wires over the ribbon and over the little short piece of wire so that they're nice and firm. Then we take the scissors and we run the scissors the way that it curls on the underside. On the thumb and the scissors make it curl. If you do it too tight, because it depends how hard you pull it as to how tight it goes. If I do it really tight, and you don't want it as tight as that, then if you run the scissor on the other side, or the knife, it straightens it out. See? So I don't need to pull it quite so tight for the next time. I made a knot, so just cut that off. And then this can go just pulling out of here. Has a nice focal point there. Right. I hope you'll think it's a good idea putting it into an old iron. This is a picture frame. We've taken out the back, and this one actually has a base here that won't go any further back, and it has no sides. So what I'm going to do is I've put it onto a piece of cork base where it's freestanding. I'm just going to put a little block of Oasis between the back and the front so that the flowers can be pictured through the frame. These things are almost miniature arrangements. They don't take very much flowers or foliage, but they're quite nice table centres as a talking point. People don't sort of think of putting little arrangements in the centre of a table, but quite often you don't have very much room with your glasses and other things. So something as small as this is quite a good idea. Just the odd bits of leaves cut down. This is a piece of ruscus. A piece of yew, just pushed into there. A little bit of Euonymus. Things that you can cut from the garden that aren't actually going to spoil your bushes. Perhaps a little bit of gyp to come out through the centre. A little bit to bring it through the frame like that. This would be quite good for a birth of a baby if you wanted to. This is a cineraria head. This is the plant I've just cut it from. If it's looking a bit sick, then it's quite a good idea to cut the flowers off anyway, because they'll last a lot longer in water or in Oasis than they will on the plant if it's beginning to feel a bit sick. Also, the plants are fairly cheap, so you can get quite a lot of arrangements out of the one plant. Blue is quite a difficult colour to get as a cut flower, so a blue cineraria is quite a nice colour. And if you've got a baby boy in the family, then this is quite a nice idea, because the parents can keep the picture frame, put his picture into it at a later date, and have a remembrance of your present. That's all you need, just a little tiny bit in it like that. Doesn't take long, and it's quite effective. And you can see I've done it all the way around, so it could be used as a table centre if you wanted it to. Don't forget that all these things need a bit of a spray. It's quite necessary because you haven't got a lot of water in the piece of foam, so you do need to keep the foliage well sprayed, especially if it's in warm conditions in winter. This teapot we've lost the lid to, so it makes it quite a useful container for flowers. I've dropped into the bottom already a piece of old Oasis that I'm not going to actually use, but it helps to higher the level, so I haven't got to have a socking great big one to stick in the top. So if you take a piece and measure it by wedging it in so that you know roughly where you've got to cut down, so that it fits nice and snugly. Always am a messy worker. Right, if you're going to use this for any length of time, you must make sure you put the water in here, because once the flowers are in, it's quite difficult to find the gap between the Oasis and the edge of the teapot. You get water everywhere otherwise. So the same as we did with the boot, we go round the top with your foliage. Note I've again got the inch or inch and a half of Oasis above the height of the container, so I can push up into it. That way you get a nice droop over the side. We had a very sick cyclamen in the house, so I've cut the leaves from that, and they make a nice centre point. They overlap, and you can make 3 or 4 as a group. Some nice bits of heather. Heather's a nice plant to put in the garden, but you've got to have a good peaty soil for them, otherwise they don't grow very well. This is a piece of September flower. You can buy this from the florists all the year round, the same as the Gypsophila. It's in fact a Michaelmas daisy, a wild type of Michaelmas daisy. Quite useful for draping out over the side of things. A bit of rosemary, a bit of curry plant and some Euronymous. I've got some roses here. These pink ones tend to open up fairly fast, and in the lights they've opened up almost fully. But then they might be similar to the ones that you've got in your garden. Again, don't forget to take off the bad petals if you've got any at the back. Push them right in so they're nice and tight, because they don't like the oasis too much. Some nice pink spray carnations, trying to match up the colours that are already on the teapot anyway. This is quite a nice arrangement to do if you're going to have a tea party and you want to surprise your guests. As a table centre, it's quite useful. And because it holds a lot of water, it should last for quite a long time. If you wanted to, you could just bring a few cones out. I'll show you how to wire these. In the autumn time, if you go underneath the fir trees and find the cones, you'll probably find that they're very tightly shut, but once you bring them into the warm of the house, you'll find that they'll open, so you can get the wires in between these petals at the bottom. What you do is you take a thick wire and you wedge it in between the folds at the bottom as near as you can get, and holding the two wires together, you twist the cone so that it makes it a nice tight fit of wire, and then you can move the cone as and where you want it to go to. So just bend it through, pull it together and twist the cone round. This is on the green coated wire, which doesn't rust, so if you want to actually keep the cones for another year, it might be worth your while to get the more expensive green coated wires. Thing is with the cones, you can take them out and use them in other arrangements when this one's died. A bit of gypping. I don't know if you can see any gaps around your side, but I've got a few at the top here. Some spray carnations. Spray carnations take sometimes up to a fortnight to open up properly. Don't get them in too tight a bud, or sometimes they don't always open up before they've sort of died off, so it's not always advisable to get very tight ones, as they don't always open. It's a nice bit of blossom in there. Haven't got any more pink bits, I don't think. I'll just put a bit more gypping at the top. Right, and if you take your teapot and you pop it onto a base, this is just a table mat, so you could just pop it onto there and it gives a nice base to your arrangement. Right, this is a nice little cup and saucer, and we also have the plate to go with it. I mean, the source of good things like this would be jumble sales or sales of work at churches or things like that, to pick up this kind of thing if you haven't already got any of your own hiding in the cupboard. again, we're just going to go around with the foliage. To make a different shape this time, I'm going to have the roses. I'm trying to pick up the colours that are actually in the pictures at the front here. So we've got a piece of the cineraria to come through. I've taken that bit out and putting that in instead because it's the wrong place. Got a nice piece of the silver foliage. This is going to come out down through here towards your handle. A few spray carnations. That's the bottom line that I want down there. And a piece of prickly foliage to go down there. So just go and fill in around the back. I've got some mimosa here. Mimosa has nice strands of these fluffy balls, which are quite nice to use as a single strand rather than leaving it on the bushy bit. It doesn't last very long, but if you actually look after it, you can dry it. It sort of shrivels up a bit, but it does stay a yellow colour and is again quite good for using in dried flower arrangements. It usually comes in a cellophane pack and you have to cut it out, stand it in boiling water and let it take the boiling water up so it makes it nice and fluffy. Some people use a hammer because they've got a very woody stem, or you can make sure that you cut it with a sharp knife at an angle so that the water can get up. The old-fashioned way used to be banging them with a hammer, but I think the modern trend now is to cut them with a sharp knife, as they say that the banging with a hammer squashes the stem more than it opens it. I'm going to put my little streamer in there. I've left the pattern free. And I filled in the back on my side as well, so that whoever's sitting on my side hasn't got an empty container. And just a little bit of blue to pick up the pattern at the front, so that you could use it like this on a sideboard, or you can stand it onto your plate to make a double rim at the bottom. Or you could do it, you leave that as an arrangement there and do a little one in the corner of here, joined together perhaps with a little bit of ribbon joining the two arrangements together. That looks quite nice, and you could actually put it onto a base again, either a wooden base or onto a mat of some sort. You could in fact just put a few leaves, put water into your dish here and just float your flowers. The old-fashioned way used to be to float a few leaves together like this with maybe a rose in between. Can't find a rose offhand. Oh, here it is. It's just a rose put into the middle like that so that it can draw up the water, with another leaf behind it joined by the ribbon like that. This is a nice shell. The thing with having children is they tend to bring things back from holidays and they tend to get dust sitting on the shelves. So this shell is being resurrected to use for flowers. It's quite useful because you can use it in all sorts of positions. Right, I'm going to use it this way round. Again, it doesn't take very much to do. Just push in the flowers from above. Take off anything that's marked. Try and keep to the colours that the shell has already got in it, because it's nice pinky insides on this particular one. Little tiny bits of foliage, just pushed in gently. A bit of the curry plant for a bit of grey. A few bits of Gypsophila, just to make it nice and light. And maybe 2 or 3 spray carnations. Use the buds at the top, as they're the smallest pieces, with the bigger ones coming into the middle. This would look nice with a little pink rose put into the middle, but mine have got too big now and it would totally swamp it. Just a few little bits like that gives your shell a new lease of life. A bit of Hebe just to come out from the base. And you could turn the shell in any direction you want to then. And you get a different position for your flowers. It's only a little tiny bit of oasis that's poked into the centre of the shell, so you have to make sure that you take that away and water it perhaps every day, and then it should last about a week. This is George. This is my favourite piece of fun, well, I was going to say pottery, but this is really heavy brass. I'll polish it up for you so it's nice and clean. And it's got a very nice base here, this big cart for putting flowers into. These are the nice big ivy leaves. I always think this looks like a hay wagon going home after a hard day's work. And George is just about ready for a good rest, I reckon. Bits of mimosa, some nice bits of variegated laurel. Brass lends itself to flower arranging very nicely, and if it's kept clean and shiny, then it's a nice picture for people to see. So cover your container or your oasis up just gently to start off with. Just to go down like that so it's got a heavy load to pull. And some nice lilies. If you get lilies, you must make sure you take off the stamens. You can either cut them off or just pull them off. There's one in the middle that isn't got the coat on. This one, that one's all right, but the others will stain your clothes if you get knocked up against them. So some nice lilies. A few bits of the single spray chrysanthemum. You can see how I'm cutting down the one stem. And from the one stem, if you cut in between all the joints, you can get quite a lot of pieces out of it. And it's worth the money then. Chrysanthemums are nice and easy to grow in the garden as well. So you can put these in the spring and have them ready to pick in the autumn. Mimosa's nice as well. It also has a nice scent, and it has a nice trailing look to it. Makes it look as though the hay carts, or the straw as I suppose it ought to be, is full up and overflowing. Just a few roses to make it look extra smart. Coming out in a nice line. That one I bent, so I just have to cut it off a bit shorter. If you bend the roses, they won't take the water through, and then the heads will totally droop. Right, that's George, ready to go home. And if you put him on a nice block, this nice piece of cork, it's quite a nice base for him to walk along. This is another fun thing. This was an old alarm clock which my son broke, so we took the face off, and it's got a nice deep cavity in here, so I thought that's handy. Just enough space to take a piece of Oasis. So this is what I'm going to do for you next. So if you have the bit of Oasis in there and you push in your foliage, I have to hold on to it. I haven't set these things in with any fixes or anything because generally speaking they're not going to be moved too much. Just a few little bits. This Mahonia leaf is very prickly, so watch yourself on it if you have a Mahonia. The thing is, it has a nice colouring in the autumn time and winter. Nice red rose for the middle. This would be quite a fun thing for Christmas or as a Valentine present. That is, if you don't knock the petals off in the meanwhile. Just a few spray carnations to give it a nice bright colour. This is a Permetia berry, which is a nice ruby colour, which is nice for Christmas arrangements as well. Make sure you get it into the Oasis a little bit, otherwise your pieces will die. Can you see any gaps there? I think that's about all I can get into there without it falling out. But it might give you an idea. Children's toys have nice nooky bits in, like a train or other things like that would be quite a useful thing to use. This would be nice in a child's bedroom perhaps. I just want to show you a few of other brass items that you might have got around the house. This is a candle holder, and there's a little brass jug and a little brass box. Well, these are fairly similar to this one, so what I'm going to do is to give you the imagination to use those, but I'm actually going to do this one. I've already put the Oasis into here. I've got some dried beech leaves. This has been dried naturally on the beech tree on a hedge, and I've just been out and cut these off. These look quite nice in the Christmas time if you want to put a bit of glitter and spray paint onto these. They look quite effective. But for brass and copper, this is a nice combination to use. Just a few bits. They don't actually harm being into the wet Oasis because they've already dried off anyway outside. So I'm just going to do a nice autumny one now with some Cotoneaster berries to trail over like this. Perhaps a few cones. And a few nice pieces of mimosa to brighten it up a bit. You can start getting mimosa just before Christmas and it runs through all the spring, so it's quite nice to be able to use the spring and the winter things together. Again, don't forget to cut it all the way down the branch for the sizes that you actually want and make it go a lot further that way. The mimosa has nice furry type segregated leaves which are quite useful as well, especially if you haven't got very much foliage in the garden, especially in the winter time when most people are quite short of fine type of foliage. I've got some nice orange lilies here. Again, cut them off fairly short because these aren't very big arrangements to take a big stem. Don't forget to take the pollen stamens off. We have a few bits of rose hips here. Again, these will dry, they shrivel up slightly, but they're quite useful to keep for a winter arrangement. And they're usually there still in the spring before the roses start growing again. Right, so that might give you some ideas on sort of wintry, nice warm winter evenings by a fire. And you could do the other ones in a similar vein, make a set of them for a table, especially if you've got a nice long table, you could move them around, or even if you put them in with your arrangement like that as a supplementary bits at the bottom. Right, for Christmas, I thought it'd be quite fun to actually construct something. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of cardboard and some Christmas wrapping paper and covered the cardboard, like so. And I've taken a Christmas cracker, an old one that the children had squashed, cut it in half and took out the bits inside. And what we're going to do is we're going to glue gun these to the cardboard and we're going to put a dish in between with the Oasis in there so we can do an arrangement in it. So what you need to do is to get a glue gun. This is quite an important part of flower arranging, so if you haven't already got one, it is quite a useful tool to have to hand. It also can be used for all sorts of things around the home anyway. So you need a good dob of glue onto the bottom of there, and you put it onto the piece of card like this. If you make sure that this is going to fit on, put a dob of glue onto the bottom of there as well so it doesn't slide off. In fact, what I should have done to start off with is to put the pot tape on, which is this. This stops the actual dish. Take this off first. This stops the dish from coming away from the Oasis then. Right. So I've got my cracker on this end, and I'm going to put the cracker other half onto here, like that. That's quite stuck properly. Might need just to press it onto the cardboard like that. The ends won't show too much because we're going to put the foliage onto the end there. I've tied a bit of ribbon around each one where it was a bit naff beforehand. Right, first of all you make sure that you've actually soaked the Oasis well, and then we're going to put the bits of foliage in round here. Nice bit of yew, a bit of Christmas holly. The holly berries always seem to be stuck down the bottom of the stem in between the leaves, so you might have to cut off the top so that the berries actually show. Make sure you cut it at a slant before you put it in. Some little bits of Mahonia. Some bits of Leylandii. You don't want to come out too much so that it swamps the table, because quite often you don't have enough room for everything on a Christmas table. These are some plastic bits of berry, which we've cut off a big stem. It was like this, and we've been along and cut some of these off. So if I cut this one off and show you, like this. These you can keep from year to year, so it's quite a good investment, this kind of thing. Especially as the birds have a nasty tendency to always have pinched the holly before you've got out to it at Christmas time. That one's going to cover, so I'm just going to cut through the bottom leaf there so it doesn't come over the top of the cracker. Then we've got some false berries here. So if your tree has lost all its berries, or you've only got the male or the female variety and they aren't together, you can buy these. We have them in silver, gold, and of course the red. So they come one end with a berry at either end like that, and you put them together and twist them slightly and add a wire to make them a bit longer so you can push them into the Oasis like that. Just bend it round, and you can then bend the berries where you want them to go to. It was quite effective amongst the greenery then. Right, you might want some bits of streamers in here, which we did a yellow one earlier on. This is the nice red one for Christmas. It can come right down onto the table. And we have a few silk poinsettias to add into it, making it really Christmassy. These come in the red, the gold or the silver. A few more bits like that. Come on either side. If you wanted to, you could add some spray carnations to it, or you could just leave it green, or you could put some silver spray paint on the leaves and make it nice and silvery. If you've got a silver cracker, obviously you do it the silvery colour. And then for a bit of fun, when you've got all your gaps filled up, you could add your Father Christmas, like this, to the top of the cracker for the children, like him. Or perhaps you'd fancy a big fat robin, like that. If you want to add any more berries, then you just add them on. Like that. And that's a nice effective way of using up some crackers that have got squashed, and it makes a nice table centre with some nice unusual container. Well, this is the pipe. I thought it'd be quite fun to do. Of course, if you've got a smoker in the house and you're going to nick his pipe, you better make sure that it's all right first. And also make sure that he's riddled it out well, so he's got all the ash out for you just before you start. It doesn't take an awful lot because it's only a minute piece of oasis in here. So I'm going to have to be a bit gentle with the flowers that I'm going to put in. This really is a miniature arrangement, and I think it would be quite a nice one to do on the miniature tape that we're going to be bringing out. So if you keep your eyes peeled, you might find this on another video. Just a little bit of mimosa like this. This is quite a nice thing to use from rockery plants from the garden, or tiny pieces that are broken off from trying to do other arrangements. Sometimes you might need to put a little wire around the stem if it's too soft to go in on its own. Doesn't take very much to do, so you have to be really careful with it. Let's have a look, one more bit of mimosa. I think we're more or less there. It's a bit long, so I'm going to cut it in half. There. A little pipe with a little arrangement. And if you wanted to, you could add a nice base for it. This is a piece of silver birch. Right, this is a nice little set of scales. You just want a little lump of Oasis on either side, put in like that. And I thought I'd go around the edge of this with some ivy leaves. Now sometimes they're nice and easy to get in and the stems are nice and stiff, but sometimes if it's a hot weather they tend to be a bit droopy, so I'm just going to show you how to put a little wire into the leaf. If you take your leaf, you'll see that there's 3 main veins in them usually, and you want to take a silver or a green wire like this, and you're going to make a stitch down and through on either side of the main vein in the middle. You push your wire through, hold it with your thumb so stop it pulling through the leaf. Just bring it down to the top of the stem, nip a bit off at the bottom, and then twist one of the wires around the stem, and then you can cut it off shorter because you don't want all that length in there. Right, so just show you again quickly. Take your ivy leaf, make a little stitch on either side, the smaller the better so that it doesn't show on the front side. Push the wire through so you've got enough to bring it down this side, hold on to the top, and then bring the wire around the stem like that and just cut it off level. And then you can actually bend the leaf where you want it to go to, and the stem's nice and stiff. Right, so just finish off going around the edge of this one. Onto this side. Gives me enough room for that one then. Hopefully they're going to stay level. I'm going to put a rose in the middle. And little bits of mimosa or gyp or any other small flower that you've got around it as well. You want to make sure you've got roughly similar things in either side, weight-wise, so that the scales don't tip up too violently. Probably need to hold on to one as you're putting them in. You carry on making a nice arrangement to fill up the little dishes. If you want to add some spray carnations, a nice little bud. And a few bits of foliage just to go in around the rose. Then we'll even it up by filling up the other side so that we come level. take off any knobbly bits, otherwise you'll never get them into the Oasis because you haven't got very much in here anyway. Oops. Coming up nearly level now. There we go. Don't think there are too many gaps in there. Got a little one on my side here. This is a nice table centre. It's nice and airy-fairy and it's unusual and it doesn't take up too much space, and it's quite a nice talking point for people. Let's put it up on a base. Right, this is a bit of a fun one. I'm sure everybody's got an empty chocolate box at some time in the year. This one just about takes one of the dishes with the Oasis in. And it's a nice, fun one to do, especially if you want to take the mickey out of somebody and say, and all because the lady loves. Some nice bits of foliage. It's amazing what kind of boxes you can actually use, or containers. Quite a lot of containers in the kitchen that people wouldn't probably have thought of using. This is nice. It's got a nice dark colour, so if you've got anything that's mauvey in the garden, like Aubrietia, this is a nice one to use it in. I've only got some irises. Leaning over a bit, come back. Straighten that up a bit, that's better. I'm going to use 3 of those because they're a bit overpowering otherwise. I'm going to have another little chop at my Cineraria plant. You have to watch these, they're very susceptible to green fly. So if you've had them outside or got them from a nursery, you want to just check on the undersides that there isn't any green fly lurking around. Otherwise, once you've brought it into your house, you'll have it on all your other plants as well. Just a few white spray carnations. And if you've got some nice stems of narcissus, they would look quite nice in here. This is a nice one to do for Mothering Sunday because you can take the chocolates out so she can't get fat and eat those and give her the flowers in the box. I'm on a diet, so I'm not allowed to have chocolates, which is really a shame. The rest of the family's eaten them all and just left me the empty box. But on the other hand, perhaps a mum who doesn't like chocolates or is diabetic might like something like this. And you can give it to her and say, "And all because we love you." There you go. Nice and quick and easy to fill. Right, this is a nice earthenware bottle. It's quite heavy. And what I've got here is a little piece of Oasis in a little dish that actually has a sticky pad on the bottom that sticks to the side of your bottle, and hopefully it should stay there without falling off. It's called a mini deck and it's really specially designed for this kind of thing. But I'm going to hold it each time I push something into it until I've actually finished the arrangement. This is a piece of rosemary. It's got a lovely aromatic smell. We're getting quite curryficated here with the curry and the rosemary and other herby bits. So don't forget, if you've got a herb garden, then perhaps you might find some sort of foliage in there. Thyme is very nice as well. It's got a nice, especially the variegated one. You could try doing this arrangement on the table if you wanted to, but the trouble is you can't get the right angle of attack on it if you don't quite know where it's going to be going on the bottle. The normal type of bottle arrangement is when you have a candle cup in the top of here to put your candle in. It just slots into the top. Because it's a nice black bottle, I'm going to use white so it shows up nicely against it. This would be a nice arrangement for a wedding anniversary. Perhaps the china one with the nice spray carnations, or freesias would be nice in here as well. Gives a nice fragrance. The main thing to remember with your flower arranging is to cover the container that you've actually used, that is the Oasis, and the dish that you've put it into, and to make sure your flowers are kept nice and fresh, keeping them in a cool place when you've bought them before you actually use them. Make sure you cut your flowers from the garden not at midday when it's really, really hot, but in the morning early or late in the evening when it's cooler then, so that they actually last a lot better. This is the penultimate one that I'm going to do, so that I hope you might have had some inspiration for all this lot with all these different things. It's a bit long. There. something a bit different that you can do with your bottle. This is nice with berries and all sorts of things like that to actually use instead of doing the usual one for the candle holder at the top. I'm supposed to put it up on a base. Just thought of as a bit of fun, we could put some flowers in this pot or potty. What we're going to do is to make a potty fleur. That means you're going to have some plants and some flowers in the same container. But to keep them separate, you need a piece of plastic that you're going to put around the bottom half of the oasis, because otherwise all the water you put in here to keep the flowers and the foliage fresh is going to swamp your plants. So we need to make some pins to put the polythene to the oasis like this, just bending it in half and pinning it on. Gather it up. It's not going to show anyway, so it doesn't matter how it looks. Just push it in all the way around so you've got a watertight container at the bottom. Make sure you haven't got any holes in the plastic before you start. Right, we've got a polyanthus here and a little Christmas tree. I've already taken the plants out of the pots and you can see they're quite root bound anyway. So if you just put, this one's going to go at the back and the polyanthus at the front, and my lump of oasis is going to slot in at the back. You might have to wriggle them about a bit. This is quite a small container. Don't forget to put some soil in the bottom, which I've already done, and you must make sure you've filled the cavity between the plants. You tend to get a triangle in here where you actually need to put your soil so that it doesn't have a big gap in between each plant. Pack it well in, and you could put a bit of moss in there if you wanted to onto the top. So you come round to the other side and you just slot your block of oasis into here like this. It doesn't really show because your leaves of your plant are hiding it there. And the idea is to make a nice arrangement on the side. This is another good thing for Mother's Day. Incidentally, if you want to keep them well fed, then you need a plant stick just to push into the soil when you plant, and this will release the nutrients that they need for about 2 or 3 months. And also, if you've got an evergreen plant in there, you need to keep its leaves free of dust, so you need a little wipe just to wipe the plant's leaves, especially things like ficus, the rubbery type plant things like that need a quick dust off every so often. Right, this is a nice piece of rhododendron which we're going to push in first of all. This is going to make like another plant at the back of here, and we've got some ruscus that has a nice bend on the branch. This you get from a florist, but it lasts a very long time, so that the flowers and the plants on this side, you can change them when they start to die off. And people will actually think these are actually growing as a proper plant. And if you want to add something to it other than the foliage, you could add perhaps some lilies. This is the Madonna lily, or longi. So this arrangement would be nice at perhaps Easter time or at Christmas. And if you didn't want a full-scale Christmas tree, perhaps one of these little coated trees would be quite a nice idea for the house. Quite clever, just crack that one. These are sold by the amount of buds they have on the stem. So if you get one which has 2 on it, then you'll pay more than for one that has only one head. It just gives you a nice sort of base to use for flowers and for foliage as well. It might just give you some ideas that you can do for your mum, perhaps again for Mothering Sunday, or to give as a gift for birthdays. Make sure you put some foliage at the back so they can't see that the things are actually put into a piece of oasis. And you could put a Father Christmas in here if it's for Christmas, or you could put a nice big bow in here just to fill it up and to make it look something special. Well now, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video and that you've actually found some inspiration in the containers that we've used. You might not have got some of the things that we've used, but I'm sure if you look around the house you'll be able to find something that is suitable for putting flowers into. So really enjoy it. Go out, look around the garden, find your little flowers and enjoy putting them into your containers. I'm sure your friends will be surprised at the things that you've done. So have a nice time, enjoy it. Goodbye.